Welcome to After School Democracy, the podcast that attempts to fill in the gaps you almost certainly missed in school about politics, economics, and history. Because people focus on the candidates and not on the party like they do in the parliamentary system, when people say Obama and the Liberals had 8 years and did nothing, what they actually had was power for 2 years with not enough senators to overcome a stupid, no-effort secret filibuster rule in the Senate that was created back when two parties were the same, and Reid could have ended it, but still had a nostalgia for the days when parties worked together, because they were essentially the same party. This is why Pelosi had the votes lined up for single-payer, and Obama was happy to sign it, but since they didn't kill that stupid rule, we ended up with a Heritage Foundation plan that was immediately demonized as socialism. Liberals literally had power for 2 years, and for the rest of Obama's term, we had inaction by the GOP. That's probably going to be Biden's term as well after the midterms. 2 years to fix the laws enough to prevent another Trump and get some form of better healthcare and move us as much as possible toward Biden's plan for carbon neutrality before we probably lose the Senate again. And thanks to vetoes, the default right now means Trump gets to do whatever he wants as the GOP in the Senate, who are supposed to check him, won't do anything. And the default now is the president gets to do whatever he wants and no one will stop him because Congress stupidly gave the president powers he can use that require a full act of Congress with a veto-proof majority now to take away and control him. And we've been calling for restrictions of the president's power ever since the Patriot Act, so unless we get all the pieces of the puzzle, we literally can't make any change while the GOP does great when the government is completely broken and crippled because the Dems get the blame when the ticket is split and the GOP does nothing, and then they make it worse when they have all the branches, so the trajectory just spirals worse and worse to fascism. The way politics is right now, imagine American power is a puzzle, or a collection of objects you have to get any power in, say, a video game. Every decade or two, there will be a brief, tiny window where you can recreate all the rules of the game because you have all the pieces. Sadly, quite a lot of time, these pieces are covered in crap from former days when the entire puzzle was covered in crap. We're electing and swapping out smaller pieces right now who are covered in crap with newer, fresher pieces down ticket. But due to the re-election rates being around 90% in the House and the Senate, the ones that we have to get all of the pieces, many of them are also covered in crap, so it has to be a slow progression. 2020 is one of those possible, rare, and essential opportunities to have all of these pieces as we have the popular vote to change election laws and finance spending. And it's a redistricting year, so if Dems win in the state governments, they can end gerrymandering, which is super popular and they know it. It was not voting in 2010, another redistricting year, that also broke Congress as they use new modern GPS and GIS data never used before to do what is called red mapping. And that's another reason why we only got the House back in 2018, and there are now new state-level laws, specifically by courts, ending gerrymandering in some states for now. As we are right now, we won't lose the House for a very long time. Huge state government wins could end the popular vote if enough states could cross the threshold to overturn and essentially nullify the Electoral College. However, there is also the issue of the Senate that could change. During the Gilded Age, the pro-business Republicans actively worked to add a lot of smallest population possible states in the middle of the nation, which is why we have 2 Dakotas. Over time, as people moved to the cities, the difference between the biggest and the smallest state that once was 15-1 is now 62-1, and Wyoming and California have equal representation in the Senate. This means that 21% of the population living in 25 rural states control half the government. With a simple majority in both houses, we could add DC and Puerto Rico next year, balancing some of that imbalance out, and we have a real shot of retaking the Senate this year. This is literally a once-in-a-decade opportunity for real change. It's this complex mess that is why people say change can't come quickly. It could in a parliamentary system, but it literally legally can't in our system. Add to that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is probably going to die in the next 4 years, and without a Democratic replacement, any progressive bill a future Bernie type got through a future more progressive Congress would be immediately shot down and killed. We also have to fix the Voting Rights Act that the Supreme Court crippled that allowed rigged elections, that blatant voter suppression in Georgia and Florida and Kansas happened, and will spread to even more states in the future if not repaired by Congress. And we have a real shot of change this decade too. California and Nevada have the most Latino populations as Texas and Florida, and Latinos don't have the same left phobia most older white voters have. And these states used to be blood red, but their unions organized, and thanks to their weird jungle primary system, is now always solid blue, and Nevada is usually blue. By 2024 to 2028, the current young Latino populations in Texas and Florida are going to be flipping the state blue, ending the Republicans' chances of ever getting the presidency again, and the Dems will probably become the new right, finally, especially as more and more states are working to adopt ranked choice voting, including leftist parties such as Democratic Socialist, Green, and Anarchist parties, along with the Libertarian Party, which will ensure no seat anywhere is an easy win ever, which will make it actually somewhat easy for the voters to hold their representatives accountable. And why we, by mathematical Duviger's law, can only have two functioning parties is something you can find in another video. This can all happen if, and only if, we can win the Senate and the presidency and most of the states. Otherwise, the president could literally move us into authoritarian fascism, as the default now is, let the president do whatever he wants. And as he's attacking the postal system, he and other states could kill or rig voting, so even though we have the majority, it won't frickin' matter as he has all the guns, aka the military and the cops, along with his heavily armed cult members. However, there's the problem with the two candidates, especially among the most politically ignorant, because schools were purposely hamstrung from teaching government and civics. Modern sensibilities on the left of policing, gay and trans rights are literally new to most people in America. We had no idea how cops behaved. On the left. On the right, they totally did, in many pockets. Trans ignorance was completely normal. Hell, I didn't start tackling my homophobia till around 2009 and my trans ignorance apathy till around 2015, and I abnormally dig into things that make me uncomfortable for the cis white males of my generation and older. And Biden was an old school Democrat, back when both parties were the same. He and Harris are pieces to the puzzle to further left-leaning changes that we must have to win, that to many are old puzzle pieces covered in crap. That is, of course, because the voting population at the time wanted to do those things on average. So how did Harris and Biden win? Well, there's one final Civil War hangover left in the parties, and that is older black voters. Most of the southern states one had to win in the primary in the South were majority older black voters. Black voters are part of the Democratic Party, not because they're liberal or progressive, though some are, but because decades of political dog whistling to racists trying to roll back their rights was done by the Republican Party, so they vote lockstep Democrat. Also, many newer never-Trumper Republicans switched parties because they aren't completely insane. That is why we ended up with these flawed candidates who are essentially centrist on the American scale and center-right on the global scale, leading the Democratic Party. And the voters in the Democratic Party decided these people were the candidates, and nothing other than some form of bombshell info showing without a doubt that Biden's alleged rape happened in '93, or more solid evidence of other rapes, will change this, and even then, Biden has the delegates he won to pick and replace him with another centrist candidate, so it's locked in. There are no alternatives, and losing this presidency will impact us for literally generations, even if we win the Senate back, to the point that impeachment would be possible, as we don't have all the puzzle pieces needed to change things enough to have sustainable change. But we focus on the candidates and the cult of personality, so much more often, you will lose the forest for the trees. In 2016, we had a chance to win the Senate back, and the impeachment could have actually had some real teeth, but 3 of the Senate candidates from red states were even more right of Biden and Harris, so red state Democrats didn't bother to vote for them, and Mitch got to be in charge, so Trump now knows he can literally do anything and get away with it, unless there's enough votes in the Senate to remove him from office. And Russia and Trumpers and alt-righters and other pro-Trump nations know this and are using social media to once again blast the individual candidates and prey on people's ignorance of the massively complex, complicated situation we are in right now that has the potential to be fixed, but only has literally this election, this decade to make it possible, creating fake leftist meme farms, pretending to be hard leftists and SJW and Black Lives Matter, and slowly gaining your trust with things you agree with, then trying to tell you not to vote because both sides are the same and liberals had all this power and refused to use it when they literally didn't. Meme making is quick and simple. This is 30 minutes of complicated discussion that barely scratches the surface, so their points are so much easier to get. Healthcare, voting rights, gerrymandering, election financing, policing, electoral college, Senate balance, and lastly and most importantly, climate change are what is on the line this election. Biden has a plan to get American carbon neutral in 15 years using a lot of AOC's Green New Deal ideas and is backed up and down the ticket by every Democrat, left, progressive, and center, including the job creation and other issues. If this fails, the world bakes. End of story. We will never reach the Paris Climate Agreement. Not happening. Nullifying all of those claims of social justice and black lives who will be most impacted by your blind emotional rage at some of the puzzle pieces needed to make any change. In a parliamentary system, the individual is secondary to the party because the party member can resign and be easily replaced. In America, that can't happen. There are all sorts of crazy states' rights and voting rules to replace them, so we have to hold our noses and vote for the party. But since we're so personality-driven first and party second, we always will have people have flaws, so the right can exploit their flaws and remove some of the puzzle pieces required for real change, and America limps along. We swap parties, thousands of millions die, we start some more wars, and the world economy goes into freefall, the planet gets warmer, and the cycle repeats. This massively confusing mess of politics is probably one of the greatest arguments for some form of anarchism, as it can't be any worse or more complicated than what America has, so long as it has some form of constitution. However, the only way that will happen is education on the issue. I, for one, kind of like the Rojava system of politics and would gladly support it here in the US, where everyone is a part of the government, representatives are rotated out a lot, and instant recall elections can be called at any time, and there are layers of representation to ensure everyone is involved in politics and everyone's voice is heard, but that would require way more education to the American people in either a ground-up movement to replace our government in general, or a city or state level shift over to it. And fascist dictatorships suppress any leftist thinking, and while the war on socialism and creation of left phobia still gripping the older generation started around 1950, and only during Occupy did these taboos start dying out, most of us in America hadn't even heard of anarchism as a real legitimate theory until a few years ago, as it was probably formally suppressed around 1920. And if Trump wins, no leftism will ever get to be part of America, as it will be suppressed, and fascist dictators are never replaced by leftist governments. Only the other way around, and if America becomes a totalitarian dictatorship, any and all CIA interventions I mentioned in the last few episodes prior to this series will be like child's play and appear ethical compared to the American fascist takeover and meddling in the rest of the world. And Europe itself is teetering on fascist thinking in its former Eastern Bloc nations. And that's why we're supporting Biden and Harris, because they are large pieces of a huge messy puzzle needed to make any change. Not because we like them, but if the puzzle isn't complete, real change will never happen. This is a trolley car problem. There is no good alternative, as you can listen to in my Virginia trolley car problem episode. And if we don't get all the pieces this election cycle, we won't ever have a chance to fix anything for another decade, and it will be too late. Go ahead, don't vote for the people you dislike, and keep sharing those memes from fake left meme factories, and all of your self-righteous lefty piety will be for nothing as you get black-bagged or baked or starve. And we aren't even discussing how we need a functioning government to protect the lives of people to end COVID. But screw those people, right? Your frickin' choice. So thank you so much for joining me on my podcast. I'm sure there was nothing controversial about this, and everyone will happily get along in the comments section, which you can do on the YouTube version of this video, or my Facebook page, After School Democracy. Link in the show notes. Just a reminder that I'm Anubis2814 on YouTube, and I have over 500 videos on different topics that I've made over the past 10 years. Please subscribe, and if your podcast site has the option, give me a like or review. If you think what I have to say informed you, consider supporting my Patreon. I'll be doing this podcast weekly and try to get it out on the same day, so I hope to see you here next week, ready to be filled with new ideas. Take care. This channel is helped tremendously by the generous supporters on Patreon. A big thank you to the wonderful Joe Taylor, Elias Garcia Guevara, and Ogrel for their support at the $10 a month Wapawet level. Please consider donating to my work if you can, and thank you all for listening.